Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast, celebrating the tracks by a musical pioneer.
By the time of Gary Numan's fourth solo studio album, I Assassin, he had been on his self-imposed live show retirement, but he was getting itchy to return. While he prepared for a potential live comeback, he concentrated on making this new, dare we say it, more positive album, though it might not seem it from the cover sleeve. We've already touched upon its first two singles, Music for Chameleons and We Take Mystery to Bed, but he then followed it up with something of a forgotten gem in Numan's catalogue, the dark and broody White Boys and Heroes. I Assassin, Gary continued Dance's sound of jazz and funk, but continued to also fuse it with his usual brand of synths. The album didn't feature his usual backing band, who were then still occupied in Dramatis. Instead, he brought in Manfred Mann's Earth Band drummer Chris Slade and bassist Pino Palladino, who played his fantastic fretless style to great effect. There was also keyboardist Roger Mason, who had played on the dance track Stories before this, and Gary's then teenage percussionist brother John Webb. I Assassin continued the trend of a somewhat 30s or 40s Dick Tracy style vibe, and White Boys and Heroes is one of the songs that perfectly brings this vision to life on vinyl, and it's the song that opens the album. The song opens with a fantastic combination of a drum machine and John Webb's African-Cuban percussion alongside Pino Palladino's delicious grooving fretless slap bass, which somehow manages to never feel cheesy and must have inspired a young Prince, as combined with the synth bass and Gary's vocals, it's all fascinating and irresistible. Like many of Gary's songs of this period, lyrically it's hard to determine what it's about. The opening lines are intriguing but pull you in instantly. We're in the movies, we're heroes, we sparkle at night, love among puppets, and one day I'll pull all the strings.
We're in the movies, we're heroes, we sparkle at night. Love among puppets, and one day I'll pull all the strings. White boys and heroes. White boys and heroes.
In his book Praying to the Aliens, Gary explained, lyrically the album was quite different to Dance. It even had a flicker of humour here and there. White Boys and Heroes had references to how some rock stars are also actors in a way, playing a part that's not really them, people like me. Lyrically, I Assassin also moved on a little from the previous albums. The paranoia was largely gone, and I found, at times, a lighter way of seeing things. I felt more prepared for what was to come, more complete as a person. So, lines like "I won't cry till this thing is over and someone agrees," and "we have no time for celebration, we have no time left at all," perhaps showcase Gary's internal struggles at the time, trying to portray a role that wasn't really him at all, but needed to keep up with appearances amongst the madness around him at such a young age. But there's also a certain level of acceptance which wasn't there in previous albums. And there's also lyrics that point towards traditional views of masculinity and what it is to be a man.
Heroes are tough and have no time for women and boys. I won't cry till this thing is over and someone agrees.
In terms of the music though, for me, it's when the synths aggressively soar like one of Gary's planes throughout the song that really grabs me, and it's signature Numan. And the finale goes to a place you don't expect, a sublime sax solo out of nowhere. In the liner notes, Gary thanks simply Mike for playing the sax on the album, and I can't seem to find out who exactly this Mike was. If you know, please get in touch. Speaking about the album as a whole, Gary explained further, "I paid Pino £50 a track, which for him at the time was good money, but a fraction of what he was worth. He was brilliant. I had never heard playing like it, and I was convinced that he was a major talent just waiting to be discovered. He came up with stunning bass lines song after song. I leaned on him heavily during the making of that album. I pushed his playing to the forefront of the tracks and inadvertently created a new style. It was one of the first times that the fretless bass had been used as the lead melody instrument, allowing the album to be atmospheric, dreamy and funky." So in August '82, Numan released White Boys and Heroes as the third Advance Eye Assassin single. The song reached a peak of number 20, his third top 20 hit in a row for this album.
White boys and heroes. White boys and heroes.
Well, he may be a tax exile in the United States of America, but the audience back at home have not forgotten him. Straight in this week at number 20, another excellent record by Gary Numan called White Boys and Heroes.
And Numan also shot a low-budget video for the August 26th broadcast of Top of the Pops, a practice that occurred a lot back then when artists couldn't or didn't want to perform in the studio.
At this week's number 20, and we have a special BBC Top of the Pops film for you of Gary Numan and White Boys and Heroes.
In this rather humorous but somewhat glamorous in its own way video, Gary plays some kind of forest park ranger who searches the valley in his Jeep and returns to his Holiday Hills home, where he at one point shoves his blonde wife and what might be his son into the pool during the line, "Have no time for women and boys." There's a lot of frolicking in the pool, and the video came a full year before Wham's Club Tropicana video, so if you play Wham over the top of the video, it works perfectly if you ask me, so perhaps George and Andrew watched this edition of Top of the Pops at the time. The single featured the non-album track War Games as the B-side. And then the 12-inch also featured the track Glitter and Ash. Both songs would eventually appear on the full-length reissues of I Assassin. According to setlist.fm, Gary has only ever played White Boys and Heroes in one tour, the 18-day American tour of I Assassin, his comeback to live performance in 1982, which he didn't bring to the UK at the time. A couple of comments about the song. On X, Simon Rippon said, "Odd one, but seemed to be a rant against the media's idea of a man, probably because of comments about Gary wearing makeup, etc. Personally liked the track, but thought it a bit disappointing compared to Music for Chameleons and We Take Mystery to Bed as a single, perhaps war songs instead." And on Facebook, Ian Fryer said, "I see White Boys and Heroes as being something of a transitional song, with Pino Palladino's funky bass line contrasted with the kind of swooping synth lines which could have come straight from Telecon. As a single, it somewhat lacks a hook, and the loose-limbed, danceable backing would have been somewhat lost on a transistor radio. Were it not for its wacky lyrics about Vera Lynn, I think War Songs would have been a much better chart contender. The lyrics are typically obscure, but then Gary was never one to rhyme moon, spoon and June, and figuring possible meanings can be half the fun. For me, the key section is this: heroes are tough and have no time for women and boys. I won't cry till this thing is over and someone agrees. Which suggests to me that Gary is having some fun at the expense of the very traditional masculine fantasies he was himself indulging in, such as display aerobatics and gun collecting. Thanks for that, Ian. Well, for me, White Boys and Heroes was never one of my favourites growing up as a Numan fan, and was another track that I overlooked for years, but it's definitely grown on me over time. And it's hard to resist that bass line and whooping synths, but perhaps, as others have said, it wasn't the best choice of single compared to others. So there's been a lot of Numan news since the last episode. Gary has announced various things, the most exciting being that he's finally playing Glastonbury this year, which is unexpected but awesome. Let's hope it's on TV, as I most definitely won't be attending that one. He also announced the brand new reissue of Berserker in new LP and CD sets coming out on April 25th. As well as A Perfect Circle, the 2022 Wembley show finally getting a release on DVD, Blu-ray and digitally this summer. And in case you missed it, I recently appeared on Trend Radio talking for an hour about Numan and playing Numan related tracks. Thank you to Colin Hubbocks for having me. If you head to trend.broadcast.radio and search for Nevermind the Hubbocks, you can find my episode on March the 10th. So thank you for joining me for another instalment of Lecture Friends. For the next ep, I'll be analysing another brilliant track from Numan's catalogue. And if you fancy a shout out, drop me an email at newmanpodcast@gmail.com or connect with me on socials where I'm at Numan Podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok. And you can also visit the YouTube page as well, which has the entire archive, including video versions of my exclusive interviews. And I'm also eager to showcase your Numanoid experiences, so send me an email again to newmanpodcast@gmail.com. And just like AJ has done from Copenhagen, he said, "Hey Tom, really enjoying the podcast. Here in Denmark, Gary Numan is seemingly a complete unknown, even among the older generation. So it is great to be able to listen in on a Numanoid online when I can't find them in real life. I also appreciate the effort you put into looking over the whole Numan discography, since finding somebody here aware of anything after Telecon seems even more impossible. I started listening through Gary's discography as I was finishing up my bachelor's degree and needed a hyperfixation to pull me through the long nights and heavy textbooks. So far my knowledge on the subject hasn't impressed anyone. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the rework or remix albums Dead Moon Falling and Jagged Edge, which I'm fond of. And for an episode this year, I hope you finally cover Dramatis in some way. 2025 is a personal favourite of mine." So thanks for that, AJ. And I agree that would be a great idea for a podcast. And I've definitely an episode as well about maybe a few of his remix albums. I've said before, Hybrid in particular is one of my all-time favourite Numan albums. But head over to newmanpodcast.com if you haven't already for all past episodes. And as ever, please leave a rating and a review when you can. But for now, thanks for joining and see you next time.
White boys and heroes.
Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast celebrating the tracks by a musical pioneer.